Hi, and welcome to Connections. I'm P.A. Bennett. You've heard the term social media, but you may not realize how pervasive it is. It's not just about Facebook anymore. It's about job searches and business marketing. It has even reached the White House. Recently, President Barack Obama appointed a data czar, the person responsible for making some sense out of all of the so-called big data being generated by social media. And right here in South Carolina, a new curriculum in social media is being offered at Newberry College. And here with us to talk about that is Professor Tonya Sosiak. Professor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
This is very exciting. This is brand new for the country, really.
It really is. We're pretty much setting sort of the trailblazing.
Now tell us, first of all, so for those of us who need a clearer understanding, what exactly is social media?
Well, social media incorporates a lot of different things with different applications such as Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and applications and programs like that. But what it incorporates are things like branding and identifying a brand, whether it's a service or a product, and incorporating or reinforcing your brand, whether it's the White House brand or whether it's a product or the NFL, and using something like social media to identify it. It's just a tool. And I think a lot of people don't really understand that social media is a tool that you would use. And so
people talk about it as the new communications tool.
Yes.
Do you see that as that being the case?
I think so. It's kind of like where we were in the 80s with cable television, or the 50s with television. This is sort of the next frontier.
Tell us about your curriculum, your social media curriculum. What kinds of courses, classes will those who major in social media be taking?
Well, I think what makes us unique is that we are going to have a cross-disciplinary program, because when I was developing the curriculum, I looked at a lot of the types of jobs that students graduating would have, and the types of jobs that are being offered regardless of the industry. And I saw over and over the types of things that they would need in things like statistics, because you have to be able to look at the data and take that data and analyze it. And so statistics, social psychology, marketing, different types of business courses, video production, digital photography, communication ethics, media writing, graphic design, web design, things like that.
So this curriculum in social media will run the gamut of disciplines.
Yes.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm. And plus, in addition to that, 4 new social media courses. So, and it will be completed by a senior capstone course where you'll take all of the things that you've learned, and you'll have some mini capstone projects based on different areas of interest, whether it's like travel, business, nonprofit, depending on the areas that you're interested in, and then complete it with a larger capstone project and sort of finish out your portfolio.
So now, when you talk about jobs, and you said that's why you really developed this course, what kinds of jobs, and what about the number of jobs will we be seeing in the very near future and now that have to do with social media?
Well, there are a lot of jobs, and they really run in a lot of different industries, everything from nonprofit, and I don't want to say specifically what companies, but nonprofit, the travel industry, Fortune 500 companies, working both in the United States as well as overseas, sports and entertainment.
What kind of job titles might a person have?
Anywhere from working as a social media in entry level to management in social media. If you are more interested in the statistical, analytical, data area, working more within that area, or more as a person who wants to do more of the looking at the development of the social media and the PR end of it. So you could really, depending on which area you're more interested in. And that's why it's important for my students in our program to be able to be cross-trained, because you have to be able to do both. I think as you probably know, you have to be able to wear a lot of hats now with any job.
So is it that with this major in social media, will the students then be minoring, or is that still the same language? Will they be having a minor caseload in another area?
Well, they can. You know, they can either double major in other areas, like some of the other majors that students may be interested in. They could minor or major in other areas like political science. You know, if a student wants to go into politics and social media, which, as you talked about, the White House, if that's an area they want to go into, or sports management, or communications, or business, they could do both.
So when you look at social media in general in our everyday lives, how pervasive is it? I said that in the intro, but how pervasive is it?
It's very pervasive. I see a huge growth in social media. I don't have any exact figures on me because I didn't bring any cue cards, but if I'm not mistaken, the growth in social and mobile marketing, because the two sort of are morphing into one by 2017, I think it was, that it will outsell television advertising.
Wow. So
it's very, very large, because now with everyone carrying smartphones, the two really become one, you know, with the way people use their phones and use social media. The two really have become one. You
know, we talk about and we think about our young people kind of being able to just kind of naturally flow into this. But what about the rest of us who may find it a little more difficult? What course should we be taking, or how should we be getting more knowledgeable, and why should we be getting more knowledgeable about social media?
Well, it's really not as hard as people think. I mean, you know, I think people think, oh, well, it's very intimidating, and it's really not. I mean, I'm 47, and you know, I started getting into social media when I bought a smartphone, when I bought an iPhone, just because I wanted to stay in touch with my family, with Facebook, and with my friends from high school and college, and then, you know, that led to Instagram and, you know, Twitter and all the other things. And I think people become intimidated. They think they have to do everything, but you can focus on one or two social media applications that you enjoy. And now the trend now is really moving towards social media applications that are specific to your hobby or your interest. And I think that that's really where it's moving towards, because the way that social constructs are becoming more, people are finding that they have, like, if you like quilting or
your niche, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can become more interested in that, and you can find groups, social groups that are more interested in that, and you can follow those kinds of things.
The amazing thing, though, and we were talking about this a little beforehand, this technology is moving rapidly. Things are changing rapidly. I was listening to an interview on NPR talking about young people are like not so into Facebook anymore. That's kind of old folk stuff.
Right. Instagram is their new thing.
It's interesting. And much luck. I may even become a student. Who knows? I certainly need it.
Okay, well, you can come by my class anytime you want.
Great. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thanks.
So what does your social media footprint look like? It could be really important when looking for a job today. Many companies say they look at applicants' profiles online. It's a two-way street as college students show us how they use social media to look for jobs in this next piece.
So the burn pile I got from an idea from my dad when he was in college. He applied to 100 companies and only got one job offer. So he would stamp burn on top of his college rejects.
USC senior Ashley Brown, like many other soon-to-be college graduates, is preparing for the professional world. For Ashley and other seniors, potential employers aren't only looking at resumes anymore. Now employers are delving into potential employees' social media accounts.
The rule of thumb is If your grandma wouldn't want to see it, don't put it up on the internet, right? Because you want to give off this image. You want to create an image of a young professional adult. And if you put up these pictures or allow certain pictures or statuses to be tagged of you and they don't put off that image, it can really hinder you in the long run.
Having an awareness for your social media accounts is what Ashley is now doing. In 2010, she started her own blog where she discussed a range of topics. Now she's using that social media tool as a competitive advantage by talking about more relevant topics.
When I write my pieces, they're tailored toward people in suits. That's what I think about. I think of a man in a suit reading my blog. And that's just kind of a weird generalization, but that's who I'm writing it for. Because those are the people that I've met in the hiring rooms and at the job fairs.
Being more aware of one's social media is becoming the new way of thinking. And it's an idea shared by others.
It's a revolution. You're going to have to know how to maneuver with it. And you're going to have to maneuver with it professionally.
Rod Sherrick is a sociology professor at USC Upstate and teaches a media culture and society class. There he's teaching students how to use social media professionally and look for more relevant content.
You need to think about everything you say, okay? It's not like you're talking in the room with a relative or a good friend. You're actually talking all over the world potentially, okay? So you got to think, what are you telling the world about yourself? That's really what you need to be doing.
By teaching his students a new way to look at social media, he hopes to make them more aware of what's good and bad social media.
I caution anyone about the information that you put out there, because your potential employer can take a look at this and decide, well, what social realm is this person, is this going to really be good or beneficial for us? And it may slant something for you in terms of your job. So I do think that they need to be more professional. And that's the way that I teach my social media platform in my classes here at USC Upstate.
Since adapting this way of thinking, Ashley has experienced the benefits.
And I've actually gotten an interview offer just straight off the internet from my blog. And that made me feel good. It made me feel like all of these 3 years of work have paid off.
As her graduation day draws near, Ashley feels confident that her online presence portrays an image employers like to see. For Connections, I'm Carlos Villalobos.
Doing these social media things seems almost automatic for our kids, but there are pitfalls and opportunities when using social media. Keosha Gregg is a social media consultant who teaches social media at a Columbia high school.
Digitized Marketing is a web marketing firm that specializes in social media marketing and web design and development. Looking at this industry, a lot of the main 3 ways we would communicate to our consumers were TV, radio, and print. But with new technologies, people now have alternatives in using those traditional platforms. So if I don't want to listen to the radio, I could just pop in a CD player or my iPod. Or TV, we can now fast forward through commercials and watch our favorite shows through Hulu or Netflix. And print, a lot of people, we're not even picking up the paper, we're going to that .com, or we're actually swiping through on our phones to actually receive our news. So with a lot of marketers, we're in the position of now seeing, well, how do we communicate with our target audience? How do we connect with them? And we found that though people aren't using traditional platforms, they are going online. They are checking their Facebook accounts, they are going to websites. And so for businesses to be where their consumer is and can engage with them in a conversation and develop a relationship, that really helps them to be able to develop a relationship that they can convert to a potential business lead. First, we establish their goals, and then we look to see which social media accounts are going to be most effective to help them to reach their goals. So if they are a company that's very visual and has lots of pictures and lots of beautiful content, then Pinterest or some of the new visual sites will be great for them. If they are a company that really wants to reach with a mass of different consumers, Facebook and Twitter are always great sites. Or if they are B2B, then LinkedIn is going to be a more beneficial social network. So it really depends on what their goals are and who they're trying to connect. And then from there, we'll be able to recommend which social media platform they use.
Keosha has also taken on the challenge of informing high school students of the dangers and pitfalls of social media.
Every Monday and Tuesday, I work with high school students, 9th graders at Keenan High School, where I teach a social media 101 course. The first half of that course is general social media information. We're talking about new social media accounts and platforms. And what some people may say, well, they probably already know about those, but they are familiar with sometimes the Facebooks and Twitters and Instagram, but I'm finding that they don't have a really, I guess, comprehensive awareness of what it's all taking place in social media, such as Pinterest and LinkedIn, which is for business use and different things like that. So it's giving them an elevated use, showing that it's not just the pound sign on Twitter, but it's a hashtag, and showing what a hashtag does. So the first half of it is giving them sort of an elevated use of social media. And the second part is sort of a social issues course, where we're dealing with digital responsibility and making sure that they're being safe online. So we're dealing with issues such as sexting. We're talking about online dating and online predators. We're discussing cyberbullying. We're discussing what information you shouldn't put online, what personal information and what information that may put you in a negative light, how you may want to steer away from that in your social media accounts, and discussing how that affects college, how that can affect your future career choices or even internship. So making sure that they're aware of those risks that can be associated with being online.
Well, this class, she teaches about like digital footprints and stuff. Like, what I hope to get out of it is just so I can like get a good job and apply for good colleges and stuff, so I won't have a bad record.
Well, they always feel as though they have a right to their own personal information, that this is my Facebook page, this is my Twitter account. Why does someone have to be, involved, concerned on what I'm doing on my personal page? But I always like to stress the point that when you post it on Facebook or when you post it on the internet, it's no longer just yours.
Many parents enjoy social media themselves, but they might not know how to help their kids stay out of trouble when using social media in its many forms. With me to talk about parenting in this age of social media is Michelle Harris, founder of Parenting Solo. Hi, Michelle.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well.
This conversation about social media and young people, we see all the negative stuff. What are you hearing and knowing by being a parent about the impact of social media on kids' lives?
Well, I hear a lot of frustration from parents, and it's interesting that you mentioned some of the topics that you've had on the show before about parents needing to keep up and how do you navigate this and teach our children how to do it. It's interesting because a lot of parents are frustrated with their children's misuse of social media, or this is an opportunity for them to have newfound freedoms that they may not have, be able to say things maybe online that they wouldn't say in person, that sort of thing. So what I have found is that in a sense, it's old-fashioned parenting on steroids, if you will, because you have to really make sure that you have very candid conversations with your children about values and boundaries and understanding that this is truly an opportunity and a time when you can't be with them all the time because you can't follow them into social media all the time. So you have to talk to them about what's appropriate and what's not, and what kind of language is acceptable and what's not, and helping them build a healthy community, I've also found, is very important, because when you have, when they're trying to block you from comments or shield things that they're doing or have fake accounts and things like that, many parents will think, oh, my child would never do that. Be very careful about saying what your child will and will not do. So what you have to do is kind of talk to them about having a healthy community of people who can sort of guide them even when you're not able to be with them online.
Now, with the computers in the home and talking about putting computers out where the whole family has access and the kids is not shut off in their bedroom. Mm-hmm. But now you're talking about the smartphone. That's what I was about to say. That lulls you into a false sense of security when you think, okay, I'm in control of where my child accesses their online community. And that is absolutely not true anymore when it comes to smartphones, when it even comes to schools, because of course there are safeguards in place when you're talking about school computers, but children who are very techie know how to get around all sorts of things. So
One of the things that I have found is that for parents, you do have to have those controls on your children's smartphones. You do have to, and not be ashamed of following their text messages, getting transcripts of their text messages. Several carriers that I've found, and I've heard parents say this, that if children say things that are really, really concerning to the smartphone user or to the carrier, they will even contact the parents and say, hey, are you aware that your child is having this conversation online? But even without that, you want to make sure that, again, you talk to your children about what is acceptable and what's not, and what are the consequences.
I know I was listening to something, and I don't even know what, probably old-fashioned radio, and they were talking about now kids can't even send out the pictures, though. We were talking about sexting.
Right.
But there is an app now where it's automatically gone. So no one else has access to it, but they still...
There's a way to always get around things like that. And of course, you can't ever erase the image from the person's mind. I know the app that you're talking about, and so many of these apps are so dangerous because many times your location is embedded in the photo or in the application, and children don't realize that. And again, nothing is ever truly erased.
Okay.
You may not have access to it, but that doesn't mean that in this cyberspace it is actually gone. So you're talking about the segment about jobs, and absolutely you have to be very, very careful about the things that you post, even when you're in high school and college. Later in your professional career, that can come back. And of course, if you send out a picture, PA, and I capture it, well, even if you take it down off your site, if I've already put it on my computer, it's always out there.
When you're talking about parents, those parents who are part of your network, how do you tell them or converse about this issue?
Well, it's very difficult because, again, many of them are venting frustration about things that they've seen with their children. So a couple of the things that I suggest is that you do become much smarter with your smartphone. You do understand how to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of these things, have a basic knowledge. And I tell anybody, if you can't figure it out, grab a 12-year-old. They will explain to you exactly how to do these things. And also, again, you help populate your children's network. One of the things that my village is my online village especially, is very helpful to me with youth pastors, with college-age friends who can look to she sort of looks up to them, my daughter does. And so being able to have them also look out for her and find out what she's posting and things that she may not even want me to see is very, very helpful. But again, nothing replaces face-to-face communication. Many times our children get lost and sucked into this cyber world because we're not talking to them.
Right.
I tell parents, and part of the pledge that we take with Parenting Solo is that you give your children 20 minutes per day of face-to-face communication. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you'd be surprised if you start timing the length of your conversations with your children uninterrupted by television, telephones, and all of that. You'd be surprised how little time we actually give our kids.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Michelle. Great information. And we hope that parents are listening.
Yes.
Because they certainly need to. All right, thanks a lot. And at this point, you may think there is so much more you need to know about social media. Well, you may want to join a group like the one we're about to meet right here.
Social Media Club Columbia was an organization, it's an organization that's worldwide, and this is our chapter, which began a few years back when we decided that Columbia is going to go places as far as the social media marketing scene is concerned. And our mission is, rather than to, if you have knowledge, to be territorial about it and not want other people to do what you do, our motto is, if you know it, share it. And it promotes the knowledge economy that's really growing in our city and in our state. In Social Media Club Columbia, when you first walk in the door, you're going to see a lot of people who look like all sorts of kind of different geeks. You see some business people, you'll see some people who look like you're like computer geek like me. And what we aim to do is it's informal, it's relaxed, it's a conversation.
I have been coming to Social Media Club meetings on and off for about 2 years and have a lot of close friends as a result of participating in the group and even some clients that I work with now. And so when she asked me if I would talk a little bit about something cool and hip and edgy, I was happy to participate. Social media obviously is something now that's really important. It's ubiquitous. Everybody I think knows what Facebook and Twitter are, and so that is a good thing, and business is moving more and more in a social direction. And so I think having a group like this where people can come in an informal atmosphere, talk amongst themselves, ask questions in a non-threatening environment, and connect with professionals that do this kind of thing on an everyday basis is really important so that we can kind of help make South Carolina really more competitive and be more 21st century.
Social media is the new customer service line. And I say new, but really it's been a trend that's been building for a good long while now. I personally have maintained an online presence myself since 1994. And it started with having a web page for your interests and the things that you do. And then you would have, then it was a blog, and then it was Friendster or Orkut, and then it was MySpace, and then Facebook and Twitter, and it's just been building and building. And what used to be something that was regarded as sort of a dorky offshoot of the computer nerd community has turned into a really viable marketing channel.
And we really want to hear from you. Our mailing address is Connections SCETV, Post Office Box 11,000, Columbia, South Carolina 29211. Our email address is connections@scetv.org. And for more information about how you can participate, go to the Connections website at scetv.org. And from the site, you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, stay connected. I'm P.A. Bennett, and I'll see you next time right here on Connections.